Hey, are you holding on to guilt? Scared to feel joy again? I'm Patty Jackson, a certified grief and trauma supporter. I'm here to help you get rid of the guilt so you can have joy in your life again. I've walked the long road of grief, first losing my husband in 2018 and most recently losing both of my parents. I know the valleys are deep, but you don't have to walk them alone. Together we're leaning into our faith to find real, lasting hope. It's time to rebuild, rediscover, and reimagine. I'm so glad you're here. Earbuds in, let's get back to loving and living your life as God intended. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grief Relief for Christian Women. I'm Patty Jackson, and if you're new here, I'm so glad you're here. This is the place where we talk about the stuff nobody really prepares you for when grief walks through your front door and changes everything. And today we're talking about 5 things I wish I'd known as a new widow 8.5 years ago. It seems impossible to me that Ralph has been gone this long because some days it feels just like yesterday. Now I want to do something a little different for this episode. I'm going to imagine that I could go back in time. Imagine I could sit down beside the woman I was when I first became a widow, and imagine I could put my arm around her and say, Patty, I know you don't believe this right now, but you're going to be okay. No, you're not going to be the same, but you're going to be okay. And I will tell her some things that I know now that I most certainly did not know then. Because you're a new widow, you're not just grieving your husband. You're grieving your identity and you're grieving your routines. You're grieving all the plans you had together. You're grieving the future you thought you were going to have with your husband. Sometimes you're even grieving the woman you used to be. So today I'm talking to that woman. Maybe she's you. Maybe you became a widow just last week. Maybe it's been 6 months or more. Maybe it's even been 5 years. Or in my case, 8.5 years, which is shocking. And you're still struggling with things nobody warned you about. And I'm talking to her from the other side of that grief. So let's say a prayer before we get started on today's episode. Dear God, thank you for meeting us in our grief. Thank you for being close to the brokenhearted. And Lord, for the widow listening today, remind her that she isn't going backward and that tears don't mean failure. Remind her that laughter doesn't mean betrayal. And remind her that moving forward doesn't mean leaving her husband behind. Give her courage to take the next step and give her the wisdom to know what that next step should be. And Lord, help her believe that there can still be joy in her life. Not because she doesn't miss him or that she's forgotten, but because you are still God and you are still good and you're still writing her story. Give her the courage to ask for help and the courage to dream again and the courage to believe that there's still purpose ahead. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's get into the 5 most important things I wish I knew back then. If you don't remember anything else from today's episode, I want you to remember these 5 things. 1, you really can feel like a normal human again. 2, your grief can affect your body, and healing requires action, not just time. 3, you're not going backwards when grief comes back. 4, moving forward does not mean leaving your husband behind. And 5, your life can be joyful again, and you get to decide who you're becoming. We're going to unpack each one of these, and somewhere along the way, we're going to talk about joy and your identity and your story and your support and why you absolutely were never meant to do this alone. So let's go to number 1. You really can feel like a normal human again. This is the first thing I wish I could go back and tell myself. You really can feel normal again. And that's a word we use loosely because, let's be honest, after you've lost your husband, what's normal? Your old normal is gone, but there is another version of normal waiting for you. And I didn't understand that in the beginning. When you're a new widow, you may wonder, am I always going to feel this awful? Or am I ever going to laugh again? Will I ever stop crying? And will I ever enjoy anything again? Well, I'm here to tell you, my answer to those thoughts is yes. But you will always feel the loss, but you won't always experience it with the same intensity. There will come a day when you laugh and you don't immediately feel guilty. And there will come a day when you make plans and you actually look forward to them. There will also come a day when you go somewhere without thinking about how much you wish he were there in every single second. There will come a day when you realize, I feel like I'm okay. And that can be shocking because sometimes we become so accustomed to surviving that we don't know what to do when we start living again. You don't just lose your person, you lost the structure around your life that you had when your husband was with you. And eventually you begin creating a new structure, like new routines or new interests, new hobbies. You might even have new friendships. I met a lot of people and still have relationships with them from my grief groups. You create new dreams, and little by little, you begin to recognize yourself again. Now let's talk about number 2, when grief shows up in your body. This is the one thing I really wish somebody had explained to me. Grief isn't just emotional. Grief is physical. You can carry grief in your body, and you may experience exhaustion. We talked about that last episode. And we've talked about brain fog, and other people call that the widow brain. You get tense and you have sleep problems. Your appetite changes. You might even get headaches and anxiety, even racing hearts or heart palpitations. Sometimes you don't even realize how much emotional stress you're carrying until your body starts saying, hey, pay attention to me. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not giving medical advice here. If you're experiencing physical symptoms, please talk to your healthcare professional. But I want you to understand that grief can affect the whole person. It can affect your body, your mind, all your emotions, and your spirit. And sometimes you think, why am I still feeling this way? It's been months. But time alone doesn't necessarily process grief. This is where I want to remind you of something very important. Healing comes from action, not just time. And we love to say, give it time. But passing time isn't the same thing as healing. You can spend 5 years avoiding your grief by staying busy, numbing yourself, working too much, traveling a lot. You can take care of everybody else and scroll through your phone till midnight. And then suddenly those 5 years have passed, but you haven't moved forward. Healing often requires action. Sometimes that action is grief coaching. Sometimes it's counseling, and sometimes it's journaling. Sometimes it's prayer. And then there's the support groups that are very helpful. Sometimes it could be getting outside, doing something like taking a walk. Sometimes it's creating a new routine. It might even mean joining a gym to start allowing yourself to take care of you and your needs. Sometimes it's finally allowing yourself to feel something you've been avoiding. Healing requires participation. You don't have to rush it, but you do have to participate in your own healing. Number 3, you're not going backwards in your grief. Y'all, if I could tattoo one sentence onto every widow's forehead, not that I'm recommending that, but it would be, you are not going backwards, because grief will surprise you. You can have a really good week and you think, I'm doing pretty good. And then boom, something triggers it. It could be a song. It could be a smell or a date, even holidays, a photograph. It could be a restaurant, any memory or any dream. And suddenly you're crying and you think, what is wrong with me? And there's nothing wrong with you. You are not back at square one. You do not have to start grief all over again. You're having a grief wave. There's a huge difference. Think about grief like the ocean, and the ocean has waves. And some days those waves are calm. Some days the waves are enormous. The existence of a wave doesn't mean that ocean went backward, and your grief wave doesn't mean you went backward either. You've expanded your capacity to experience grief, and that's actually an important part of healing. 4, moving forward is not leaving them behind. This was huge for me because I think many widows secretly worry, if I move forward, does that mean I'm leaving him behind? No, you can move forward while carrying love with you. Your husband doesn't have to disappear from your story just because you're building a new chapter. You can talk about him and you can tell stories. We have some of the funniest stories about Ralph, and I love to hear them as much as I love to tell them. You can keep the photographs and look at those. Always have those around if you want to. You can celebrate his birthday You can remember your anniversary, and you can laugh about the ridiculous things he did. And believe me, with Ralph, there were plenty of ridiculous things. You can cry because you miss him, and you can still move forward. Newsflash, moving forward isn't forgetting. It's integrating his life and your love into the woman you're becoming. So that leads me to something else. Expanding your capacity for grief and joy. This is something I wish I'd understood earlier. You don't have to choose between grief and joy. You can have both. You can miss him terribly and still laugh. You can have a wonderful vacation and cry when you get home. You can have a great Christmas and still wish he were sitting at the table. And you can be grateful for your life and still wish your husband were here. Those aren't contradictions. That's what we call grief. Your heart becomes capable of holding more than one emotion at the same time. And eventually your capacity for joy expands alongside your capacity for grief. This always makes me think of my marriage to Ralph. Man, I could love him one minute and be so mad at him the next, because more than one emotion can exist even in a great marriage, just as it does in grief. And number 5, your life grows where your attention goes. This may be one of the most practical things I learned. Your life grows where your attention goes, because if all of your attention goes toward what you've lost, your world becomes pretty small. And listen, I'm not saying just stop thinking about your husband. Absolutely not. I'm saying don't let your loss become the only thing you pay attention to, because there's still a life in front of you. What are you curious about? What do you want to learn? Who do you want to become? Where do you want to go? Is there anything you want to do to help someone? What makes you laugh? What makes you feel alive? What have you always wanted to try but never did? You just need to start paying attention to these kind of thoughts. For me, my attention seemed to go toward healing myself after the loss. Therefore, I immersed myself in grief groups and grief courses and finding joy after grief. And I found grief coaching and, of course, this podcast. Yay! So here's another thing I wish somebody had told me. After a major loss, people love to say, you need to find yourself again. But I'm not sure I agree, because maybe you're not supposed to find the old you. Maybe you're supposed to decide who you're going to become. You're not the same woman you were before your husband died, and that's okay. The death of your husband definitely changes you, but you get a say in what happens next. You get to decide. You get to say, I'm going to become more compassionate, or am I going to become a stronger person? Am I going to travel? Am I going to help other widows? I'm going to laugh again, and I'm going to try something that I've always wanted to try. I'm going to deepen my relationship with God. You don't have to recreate your old life. You get to build that new one. The story you tell matters more than what happened. Now, let me be careful here. I'm not saying the story of what happened doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. Your husband's death matters. Your memories matter. Your pain matters. But eventually you get to decide, what does this loss mean in the story of my life? Maybe your story is, my life ended when my husband died. Or maybe your story becomes, my life changed when my husband died, but it didn't end. That's a very different story. One leaves you powerless, the other leaves room for possibility. And as a Christian woman, I believe there's another part of the story we can't forget. That is, God is still writing your story. You may not understand the chapter and you may not like that chapter, but you have to have faith in God's plan. And here's one I wish I could have put on a billboard. Not everyone is going to understand your grief. Some people will say the wrong thing. Some people will disappear. Some people will expect you to be better before you're ready. And some people will tell you how long you should grieve. Some people will compare your grief to theirs. And some people simply won't know what to do with your pain. That doesn't necessarily make them bad people. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with grief because they don't know what to say. But here's what you need to remember. You don't need everybody to understand. You need a few safe people who will sit with you in the uncomfortable places. People who won't rush you, people who won't fix you, people who won't tell you how long grief should take, and people who will simply say, I'm here. or I'm listening. So this may be the most important bonus of all. You were never meant to do this alone. God created us for community, and grief can be incredibly isolating. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. That's why finding your people matters. You need people who understand the widow experience. People who won't make you explain why February 14th is so hard, or why your husband's birthday still hurts, or why you cried when you heard a song on the radio. You need people who get it. And that's one of the reasons I created the grief relief community, because I don't want women walking through this alone. I want a place where you can show up exactly as you are. If it's messy, or you're sad, confused, or you could be hopeful, have the faith. You could be angry or laughing or crying, all of it together or separately, because you don't have to have it all together before you belong. I was just thinking, if I could sit across the table from the new widow version of me today, here's what I'd tell her. You're going to survive this. You're going to laugh again. Hey, you're going to have a good day, and you're going to have bad days too. You're going to discover things about yourself you didn't know were there. You're going to help other women because of what you've walked through. And you're going to learn that grief doesn't disappear, but it changes you. You're going to learn that joy doesn't betray your husband. You're going to learn that moving forward doesn't mean leaving him behind. And you're going to discover that God was with you the whole time. You just couldn't always feel him. Your grief relief challenge for this week is, I want you to grab a piece of paper. At the top right, who am I becoming? Then answer these 5 questions. 1, what part of my old life do I want to keep? 2, what part of my old life am I ready to release? 3, what do I want more of in my life? 4, where am I currently putting most of my attention? 5, who is God calling me to become in this next chapter? Don't overthink it. Just write it. Because sometimes healing begins with getting the thoughts out of your heads and onto paper. So if you're listening to this as a new widow, I want you to hear this from me. You don't have to figure out the rest of your life today. Today, you just need to take the next step. And sometimes the next step is tiny. It could be just to get out of bed, take a shower, eat something, or call a friend, take a little walk, pray, cry, rest. You can ask for help. And eventually those tiny steps become movement, and movement becomes progress. Progress becomes life. It's a different life. It's not the life you planned, but a life that can still be meaningful. A life that can still have purpose. A life that can still have laughter. A life that can still have love. And yes, a life that can still have joy. I'm Patty, and this is Grief Relief for Christian Women. Remember, you don't have to get over your husband. You don't have to forget him, and you don't have to rush. You don't have to do this alone, and you just have to take the next step. And girl, I'll be right here cheering you on. I want to leave you with one major thought. Your husband's death changed your story, but it did not end your story. God is still writing it. Thank y'all. Have a great week. Love ya. See you next week. Bye. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope something in this episode gave you a little peace, a little hope, or maybe even a smile. If it did, would you do me a quick favor? Head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It could help more widows find the courage to take their next step. Until next time, remember, you're not alone and joy is still possible.